Hey, Bob McAdoo was the MVP of this league.
Yeah.
When you talk about changing the game, he's a 6'11" dude shooting threes.
He was the first
first stretch forward, the original, the real one.
So he changed the game.
He totally changed the game.
To quote a 1976 Sports Illustrated article, the quickest tall man, finest shooter, and most astounding outside scoring machine ever to play the game. At the time, that's exactly what he was. At 6'9", he was supposed to be playing in the post, banging down low, and cleaning up on the glass. But what made Bob McAdoo so unique was that as a center, you could run plays for him off the ball, he could dribble like a guard, and shoot better than most guards. His outside shot and pull-up ability was completely unheard of for a big man in that time, and he took full advantage of it during his early years in Buffalo, where he won 3 straight scoring titles and an MVP. Contract issues led to him being traded to New York, where he joined a team that looked unbeatable on paper, but just had too many mouths to feed. But after this, his career took a surprising turn, where it seemed he wasn't wanted anywhere. But luckily, in the early 80s, he would get a shot with the upstart Showtime Lakers, where even though he didn't want to, he would come off the bench to help the Lakers reach 4 straight NBA Finals and win 2 titles, before ending his career overseas. But it's almost criminal how little you hear Bob McAdoo's name nowadays, as he was genuinely in the discussion of best player in the league during a time where Kareem-Abdul-Jabbar was at his best. And even if you don't want to go that far, at the very least, Isaiah Thomas is right. Bob McAdoo completely changed the game and left opponents in disbelief night in and night out. And that's why he deserves his long overdue shine on today's episode. Let's jog your memory. A North Carolina native, Bob McAdoo would attend Ben L. Smith High School in Greensboro. As a senior in 1969, he led Smith to the semifinal in the state tournament, while also setting a new state record in high jump of 6 feet 7 inches, beating out his future teammate Bobby Jones. Coming out of high school, there was no doubt McAdoo was a D1 talent, but his test scores were too low for him to be eligible to play D1 basketball. So he would head to Indiana and enroll at Vincennes Junior College. As a freshman, McAdoo would help lead the team to the 1970 NJCAA title, where he would score 27 points in the championship game. And McAdoo would say that this win would lead to opportunities for not only him, but also his teammates, as they were all getting recruiting attention from D1 schools. Additionally, McAdoo would be invited to the tryouts to the Pan American Games and would make the team. Prior to his sophomore season, a scrimmage saw McAdoo's team lose to the incoming freshman team with guard Foots Walker, which would lead to McAdoo working with Walker on his dribbling and quickness, among other things, all year, which he mastered quickly. During his sophomore season in 1971, McAdoo would average 25 points and 11 rebounds, as he was named an NJCAA All-American. The summer brought the Pan American Games, which would be a huge disappointment for the US, as they would lose to Cuba in their first game, ending a 24-game win streak. Overall, they would finish with a 2-1 record, and wouldn't advance to the medal round, as McAdoo would appear in 2 games, averaging 11 points. Going into 1972, McAdoo would be a member of the North Carolina Tar Heels, but this was an extremely unlikely recruit for Coach Dean Smith, as he had a policy that he did not recruit junior college players due to their courses sometimes not being accepted by North Carolina. But as recruitment letters from other D1 schools poured in, McAdoo's mother contacted Coach Smith to ask him why they weren't recruiting him, so Smith would make an exception this one time, and clearly it was the right decision. The Tar Heels were loaded with future NBA talent, but the junior McAdoo was the best of the bunch. In his first season of D1 basketball, he would lead the team in scoring and rebounding while shooting over 51%. They would start the year 10-0 before finishing the regular season with a 21-4 record. They would defeat Duke in the ACC tournament semifinals before losing to Maryland in the final. They would begin the NCAA tournament with an easy win versus cross-state rival South Carolina in the East Regional semifinal, where McAdoo would play poorly with 11 points on 4 of 14 shooting, but he would have 13 rebounds. He was much better in the regional final versus Pennsylvania, as he would have 17-9 on 50% shooting in another win. The Final Four brought Florida State, and although McAdoo would put up 24-15 on over 52% shooting, he would foul out, and the Seminoles would win by 4 points. Although it wasn't the way they wanted their season to end, they would still defeat Louisville in the third place game, behind McAdoo's 30 points and 19 rebounds on 60% shooting, as overall he would be named first team all-conference and a consensus first team all-American, behind averages of about 19.5 points, 10 rebounds, and 2.5 assists per game. So it was the summer of 1972, and at this time, the NBA had a requirement that players complete the full 4 years of college before being eligible for the NBA draft. But the rival ABA didn't have this rule, and top players such as Spencer Haywood were opting for the ABA instead of the NBA, as it allowed them an earlier opportunity to make money and improve theirs and their families' lives. And because of this, in the summer of 1971, the NBA would add a hardship clause, which essentially allowed players to enter the draft if they could prove they were a hardship case by meeting certain criteria, such as poor financial status, family struggles, or an inability to obtain employment in another field. So during the summer of 72, McAdoo would apply and would be granted early eligibility by the NBA. But after this, rumors began which said McAdoo had already signed a contract with the ABA during his junior year at North Carolina, which McAdoo denied. But when these reports got back to then NBA Commissioner Walter Kennedy, he advised NBA teams not to draft McAdoo. Portland had the first pick in the 72 draft and seemed to take Kennedy's advice by drafting LaRue Martin. But when the Buffalo Braves were on the clock, they ignored Kennedy and would select the UNC star with the second pick. Additionally, when the official ABA draft occurred 2 days later, McAdoo was also the first overall pick. McAdoo would ultimately choose the NBA, where although he would have a great rookie year, he was limited from doing what he was fully capable of. So even though McAdoo had a never-before-seen skill set for a player his size, it was still the early 70s, and when you're a 6'9" big man, you play your role the traditional way, down low with hook shots and turnarounds. But the 210-pound McAdoo was considered unprepared and too frail to play down low, and was used more at forward by Buffalo head coach Jack Ramsey. And on top of being played out of his preferred position, McAdoo wouldn't even get into the starting lineup until halfway through the year. Elmore Smith and Bob Kaufman were the team's top pivot men, and they also featured second-year guard Randy Smith. But overall, they just weren't that good, and it frustrated McAdoo, as he would later criticize the team this year by saying his wife could outrun a lot of the players on the team. As a rookie, with McAdoo sometimes playing at the 3, he struggled guarding the game's best small forwards. And on offense, he had to learn how to play off the ball and put the ball on the floor more, which would end up being the best thing that could have happened to him. But even with his unexpected role, he still managed to be the team's second best scorer and third best rebounder. He would also finish first among rookies in scoring and second in rebounding, as he was named to the All-Rookie team and would take home the Rookie of the Year award. McAdoo would still record 59 games in double figures and 39 double-doubles, but it was right at the end of the year, when the soon-to-be 21-61 Braves had nothing to lose, that Ramsey would give in to McAdoo's pleas and let him play center, where he would just go for 39-17 versus Portland, then 39-15 versus Houston, and finally end the year with 45-25 versus Houston again. But the Braves missed the playoffs, and McAdoo's rookie year saw him average about 18 points, 9 rebounds, and 1.5 assists per game. So now Buffalo knew they had their man of the future, and would trade Elmore Smith to the Lakers for forward Jim McMillan before the 74 season. Additionally, they would trade for forward Gar Hurd, and in the draft, they would select point guard Ernie DiGregorio to facilitate the offense. And the retooled Braves, led by a second-year McAdoo, became the NBA's top offensive team. In year 2, McAdoo didn't do much, except for lead the league in scoring, finish third in rebounding, and be top 5 in blocks, while becoming the last player to average at least 30 points and 15 rebounds in a season. And he would do this on a career-high and league-leading 54.7% shooting. An injury to Kaufman would put McAdoo at center permanently, and he was dominating, as he hit double figures in every game he played, scoring less than 20 points just 4 times, while recording 41 games with at least 30 points, 9 games with at least 40, and his career high of 52 points to go along with 22 rebounds on over 71% shooting in a February 22nd loss to Boston versus one of the league's best defenders in Dave Cowens. Additionally, he would record 59 double-doubles and 13 games with at least 20 rebounds. McAdoo was obviously voted to his first career All-Star game and was voted second-team All-NBA. But the Braves were all offense and no defense, as their 111.6 points per game was tops in the league, but they allowed 111.8 points per game, which was dead last. But they still greatly improved, finishing at 42-40 to play the top-seeded Celtics in the Eastern Conference semifinals. Although the Braves would lose, they would push the Celtics to 6 games, with McAdoo continuing his offensive domination. He would average nearly 32 points and 14 rebounds for the series, but his shooting did drop to about 48%. He'd light up Boston for 44-16 on 21 of 40 from the field in a Game 4 win, and would drop 40 points to go along with 15 rebounds in the series-deciding Game 6 loss. And for the regular season, McAdoo averaged about 30.5 points, 15 rebounds, and 3.5 blocks per game. 1975 would be much of the same for McAdoo and the Braves. They would be a top 2 scoring offense, while again having one of the league's worst defenses. McAdoo and Randy Smith had formed one of the league's best offensive duos, but McAdoo continued to improve, as this year he would again lead the league in scoring on a career-high 34.5 points per game, while still averaging over 14 rebounds and 2 blocks, which would both be top 5 in the league. Additionally, he would lead the league in made free throws. McAdoo would play all 82 games this year, as he would again hit double figures in every game, and fail to score at least 20 just twice. He would have 58 games with at least 30, 21 games with at least 40, and a 51-point, 20-rebound explosion versus Houston on March 18th, as he would also record 68 double-doubles on the year. Unfortunately for Buffalo, Di Gregorio, who was coming off a Rookie of the Year season, would suffer a knee injury early in the year and would only appear in 29 games this season and be out for the postseason, as he would never be the same player that he was as a rookie. Nonetheless, the Braves would still win a franchise record 49 games, and for his incredible individual season, coupled with the team's success, McAdoo would not only be voted first-team All-NBA as well as an All-Star, but he would take home the 1975 NBA MVP award. The 3-seed Braves would take on the 2-seed Washington Bullets, led by Elvin Hayes and Wes Unseld, and McAdoo would proceed to put together one of the greatest playoff series performances of all time. A Game 1 win would see McAdoo go for a game-high 35 points, 14 rebounds, and 5 blocks on 16 of 28 shooting. The Bullets would even the series in Game 2, with McAdoo again leading all scorers with 36 points on 14 of 25 shooting. Buffalo would fall behind 2-1 after Game 3, even though McAdoo went for a game-high 34 points and 19 rebounds, but would only shoot about 37%. But with the Braves needing a win in Game 4 to avoid a 3-1 hole, McAdoo would not be denied. Playing at home, he would go off for a postseason career high of 50 points on 20 of 32 shooting, while also pulling down 21 rebounds, as the Braves won by 6 to even the series. A Game 5 loss would see McAdoo go for a more modest 34-13 on less than 36% shooting, but the Braves would force a Game 7, behind 37-10 from McAdoo. Unfortunately, his incredible series would be all for naught, as even though he went for 36-11 in Game 7, Washington would blow out Buffalo, ending their season. But McAdoo's MVP year saw him average about 34.5 points, 14 rebounds, and 2 blocks per game. 1976 would be the best year of Buffalo's McAdoo and Smith duo, as the two combined for nearly 53 points per game, with McAdoo leading the league in scoring for the 3rd straight year, and finishing in the top 10 in rebounding. He would again hit double figures in every game, and have at least 20 in 73 of them, while recording 40 in 15 games, and having 2 games with at least 50. He would also record 59 double-doubles, and have 6 games with at least 20 rebounds. The Braves would have another solid year, as they would finish with a 46-36 record. But it seemed at times that McAdoo and the Braves weren't seeing eye to eye. On Christmas Eve, the Braves suspended McAdoo indefinitely. This came shortly after the birth of his second child, and with his father recovering from surgery. McAdoo had told the team that his back was too sore to play in a December 23rd game, but after doctors deemed him healthy and x-rays came back negative, he would be suspended. So this likely put strain on his relationship with the organization, and he also was possibly upset about his salary compared to other, less prominent members of the team. But his suspension lasted only 1 game, and come playoff time, he was ready to do his usual damage. The first round brought a matchup with the Sixers. McAdoo came out swinging with 36 points and 21 boards on about 54% shooting in a Game 1 win. He would have an uncharacteristically bad Game 2, with 21 points and 13 rebounds on 6 of 21 shooting in a loss. But 34 points and 22 rebounds from McAdoo in a Game 3 win would push them through to the conference semis versus the top-seeded Celtics. McAdoo had a slow start with just 16 points in Game 1, but made up for it with 40 in Game 2. However, the Celtics would win both. McAdoo would average 27 points and 14.5 rebounds across Games 3 and 4, as the Braves would take both to even the series. But Boston would win Game 5 easily, even with McAdoo putting up 23 and 14. Then Game 6 would see Boston take the series, as McAdoo had 28 and 14. But overall, he had difficulty against Dave Cowens. And for the regular season, he put up about 31 points, 12.5 rebounds, and 2 blocks per game. Going into 1977, McAdoo was entering the last year of his contract, and the Braves had also drafted another high-scoring rookie out of Notre Dame, named Adrian Dantley. McAdoo's scoring was way down from what it had been the past 3 years, but his average of nearly 24 points would still lead the team in the early stages of the year. But then in late November, McAdoo's name was coming up in trade rumors with both Seattle and New York, and this was due to him reportedly rejecting a $350,000 per year contract extension from Buffalo and demanding $500,000 instead. So Buffalo would have to act fast, and try to recoup whatever they could, knowing they would essentially lose their star at the end of the year. And on December 9th, 1976, just 2 days after he scored 42 points and pulled down a career-high 29 rebounds, the news broke that McAdoo would no longer be a Brave. McAdoo would be the headliner in a package sent to the New York Knicks. The Knicks were a few years removed from their final championship to date and were hoping to avoid a full rebuild, so they would bring in a 25-year-old McAdoo to take some of the pressure off their aging backcourt of Walt Frazier and Earl Monroe. But the season prior, the Knicks had acquired four-time All-Star Spencer Haywood, who, like McAdoo, had been a dominant offensive force throughout his career. However, a lingering leg injury would limit him to just 31 games this year. But when he did play, McAdoo's arrival had forced Haywood to take a back seat on the offensive end, with him being expected to be more of a defender and rebounder, which reportedly led to conflict between the two. But in McAdoo's 52 games with the Knicks this year, he would up his scoring by 3 points and overall finish as a top 5 scorer and top 5 rebounder in the league, while also shooting over 53% from the field during his time in New York this year. He would still hit double figures in all but one of the 72 games he played, have 5 games with at least 40, and 54 double-doubles, as he would earn his 4th straight All-Star selection. But the Knicks, who were sitting at 11-13 at the time of the McAdoo trade, only managed a 40-42 record and missed the playoffs. And for the regular season, McAdoo put up about 26 points, 13 rebounds, and a block and a half per game. Going into 1978, McAdoo had a new contract, which reportedly paid him $450,000 annually. And the Knicks were now being coached by the former player whose shoes they were trying to fill, in Willis Reed. And while Haywood and McAdoo had their differences, one thing they would agree on is that Reed as a coach may have been a little too rigid in what he expected from the team. And the Knicks had also traded away franchise legend Walt Frazier during the offseason. So with him gone and a lesser role for Haywood, McAdoo was far and away the focal point of the offense, and he played as such. Yet again, he was near the top of the scoring leaderboards and a top 10 rebounder, while shooting over 52% for the year. He would have at least 20 points in 64 games and 3 games with at least 40, while also recording 56 double-doubles and 6 games with at least 20 boards, as he would be named an All-Star for the final time in his career. But similar to his time in Buffalo, the Knicks were a high-powered offense who didn't really play defense, as they scored the 3rd most points in the league, but allowed the most points, and would finish with a similar record to last year at 43-39. However, this time, it was enough for a playoff berth. The first round brought the Cavs, who New York would sweep in 2 games. McAdoo came out strong with 41 points on 68% shooting in Game 1, then had 27-12 on nearly 58% shooting in Game 2, as the Knicks moved on to face the Sixers. But this series was a disaster. McAdoo would have just 12 points on 6 of 19 shooting in a 40-point Game 1 loss, then would have 10 points on 5 of 15 shooting in a Game 2 loss. He would be much better after this, as he averaged over 25 points and 12 rebounds across Games 3 and 4, but New York would lose both, as they were swept by Philadelphia. And for the regular season, McAdoo put up about 26.5 points, 13 rebounds, and 1.5 blocks per game. Reed was fired 14 games into the 79 season and replaced with Red Holzman, who had been the coach when McAdoo first arrived. McAdoo continued his usual elite offensive play, as in his time with the Knicks this year, he was putting up nearly 27 points and 9.5 rebounds per game on over 54% shooting. But the Knicks had chemistry issues, and him and Haywood were better when played separately than together. And for as good as McAdoo was, the team was only getting worse. So first, in early January, the Knicks sent Haywood to the Jazz. And then just over a month later, with the Knicks sitting at 25-33, McAdoo was dealt to Boston, as New York decided to build for the future. But this trade would begin a tumultuous period in the career of the great Bob McAdoo. The Celtics were 23-33 when McAdoo joined the team, and were led by player-coach Dave Cowens. So this was already going to be a strange dynamic for McAdoo, when the team's top player, who plays the same position as McAdoo, would also be his coach. But McAdoo would suit up for 20 games for the Celtics, where he would average over 20 points and 7 rebounds on 50% from the field. Yet the Celtics kept losing, and finished the year at 29-53. And for his overall regular season, McAdoo averaged about 25 points, 8.5 rebounds, and a block per game. This trade almost destroyed the Celtics, as reportedly, GM Red Auerbach almost quit his job after finding out that Boston had given 3 future picks for McAdoo. Going into 1980, the team had relieved Cowens of his coaching duties and were set to welcome their top draft choice from the year before, in a forward coming out of Indiana State. And it was known that McAdoo also didn't want to be in Boston. So in early September, the Celtics traded McAdoo to the Detroit Pistons for the number 1 and number 13 pick in the upcoming draft, with McAdoo also acting as a form of compensation for Boston signing ML Carr away from the Pistons. Reportedly, Detroit didn't want to make this deal in the beginning, but Carr had a bonus provision in his contract which Detroit wasn't honoring, which could have led to them receiving no compensation for Carr. So when the Celtics pointed this out, Detroit made the deal out of fear of losing Carr for nothing. And this would be an incredible deal for Boston, as they would send the picks they received to the Warriors to acquire Robert Parrish and the pick that became Kevin McHale. So it's the 1980 season, and McAdoo would be on one of the worst teams in the league. And for the first time since his rookie year, he wouldn't lead the team in scoring, as he would be second to Pistons legend Bob Lanier. Except after requesting a trade, Lanier would be sent to Milwaukee in early February, leaving McAdoo as the team's top player. But the team also moved on from coach Dick Vitale after a 4-8 start, and new coach Ricky Adebayo would inexplicably sit McAdoo for about a month after the Lanier trade. And when McAdoo came back, he would suffer a pulled groin, as overall he would only appear in 58 games this year for a 16-66 Pistons team, and for the regular season, McAdoo would average about 21 points, 8 rebounds, and a block per game. The 81 season would be one to forget for McAdoo. Foot injuries would have him on the injured list to begin the year, and overall he would appear in just 6 games for Detroit between late December and late January. However, McAdoo's absence from the court was controversial, as he was claiming since mid-February that he was fine to play. The Pistons and GM Jack McCloskey would claim that they didn't feel he was ready, while there were other speculations, such as Detroit choosing not to play McAdoo so they could tank for the number 1 pick, who at the time was supposed to be Virginia big man Ralph Sampson. But McAdoo's lawyers speculated instead that Detroit was choosing not to play him to manipulate his contract for next year. Regardless, McAdoo wasn't seeing any action and eventually filed a grievance with the league, which led to him being waived by the Pistons, yet still being paid. But in mid-March, he would sign on with the New Jersey Nets for the final 10 games of the year and would hit double figures in 4 of those games. But the Nets would go 24-58 and miss the playoffs, as in McAdoo's 16 games this year, he averaged about 10.5 points, 4 rebounds, and a block per game. McAdoo again would find a new home during the 82 season, but this time he'd be staying a while. After the season, McAdoo was still recovering from a foot injury and refused the Nets' offer while demanding more than they were willing to pay. Yet they retained his rights, and on Christmas Eve, they would send him to the Lakers for a pick and cash considerations. So on the surface, it seemed like a fall from grace. A former MVP and scoring champ, bouncing from team to team, and now being reduced to a bench player. But McAdoo was exactly what the Lakers needed. With a banged-up Kareem-Abdul-Jabbar and his backup Mitch Kupchak being lost for the year, the Lakers lacked front-court depth, and McAdoo was appealing due to his ability to play the 4 or 5. McAdoo joined a Showtime Lakers team who had won the championship in 1980, but were coming off a disappointing first-round loss to Houston last year. McAdoo would come off the bench in all 41 games he played for the team this year as part of a great reserve unit, featuring him, Michael Cooper, and Kurt Rambis. McAdoo would give the team nearly 10 points per game on about 46% shooting, as the Lakers finished at 57-25 and would get a semifinals matchup versus Phoenix to begin the playoffs. McAdoo would start great with 21-12 in a Game 1 win, and overall would score in double figures in 3 out of the 4 games, while averaging about 14-9 for the series, as the Lakers swept the Suns to move on to a conference finals matchup with the Spurs. This would end in another sweep, with McAdoo dominating. He would have at least 21 in 3 out of the 4 games, and 1 double-double, as overall he averaged 20 points for the series, and would even score 26 on 12 of 16 shooting in the series-clinching Game 4 win. So the Lakers were making their return to the NBA Finals, where waiting for them was a 76ers team led by Julius Erving. This series would go 6 games, as McAdoo would average over 16 points on nearly 57% shooting for the series. He would surpass 20 points just once, but would score in double figures every game, as he shot below 54% just once in the 6 games. And with a chance to win his first title in Game 6 at the Forum, McAdoo put up 16 points, 9 rebounds, and 3 blocks on over 57% shooting, as the Lakers were champions, and after a frustrating few years, McAdoo was finally on top. But for his regular season, he put up about 9.5 points, 4 rebounds, and a block per game. Going into 1983, Rambis was a starter, and the Lakers had a prized rookie who they had taken first overall in another North Carolina alum named James Worthy. McAdoo had re-signed with the Lakers and continued to come off the bench to provide valuable minutes in place of Kareem, and was one of the league's top bench scorers, as after a full training camp to really learn the offense and his role, he was now averaging 15 points off the bench on 52% shooting. But a toe injury in mid-February would end his regular season and put his postseason in jeopardy. The Lakers were still the Lakers and finished 58-24 to get a conference semifinals matchup versus Portland. However, they would be without a still recovering McAdoo. Nonetheless, they would beat Portland in 5 games. McAdoo was back for a conference finals rematch versus San Antonio, and after a slow start, putting up a combined 13 points in the first 2 games, which the team split, he would get back to his regular self in the next 4 games, as he had at least 12 points in each game while shooting at least 50% in 3 of them, which included 14 points in the first half of Game 6. But in the closing minutes of the half, he would severely bruise his right thigh, which would knock him out of the remainder of the game. But the Lakers would still win in 6 and advance to the NBA Finals, where the Sixers were again waiting. But this time, they had a new man in the middle. The thigh injury would keep McAdoo out of the first game of the finals, as an aging Abdul-Jabbar would have to play many more minutes than his regular season average, and Moses Malone would dominate for the entire series, as the Sixers won Game 1. McAdoo would return in Game 2 to play 19 minutes and score 10 points, in what would be another Sixers win. He would have 12 points, 7 rebounds, and 3 steals in a Game 3 loss, and then with his thigh bothering him too much, he would sit out Game 4, as the Lakers were swept. But for his regular season, McAdoo averaged about 15 points, 5.5 rebounds, and a block per game. 1984 would be a relatively healthy year for McAdoo, as he would appear in 70 games, his highest total since 1978. Worthy would have an increased role in year 2, and the Lakers had also added another great rookie in Byron Scott. McAdoo would be the team's top scorer among players who only came off the bench, averaging over 13 points in less than 21 minutes per game, while even recording 11 games with at least 20, and 3 with at least 30. The Lakers began the year at 9-2, and would string together a late season 8-game win streak, as overall they would finish with a 54-28 record and get a first round matchup with Kansas City. Although the games were close, the Lakers would sweep the Kings in 3. McAdoo would have double figures in each game, including 19 points on over 58% shooting in Game 3. The Lakers would face Dallas in the second round, which would end in a 5-game series win for LA. McAdoo's best game would be in Game 3, when he had 23 and 8 on 11 of 16 shooting. However, he would struggle in the series clinching Game 5, putting up 5 points on 2 of 5 shooting. The conference finals again brought the Suns. McAdoo would have an incredible conference finals, as he would average nearly 16 points on over 55% shooting. He would have 20 points in a Game 1 win, and then 23 in a Game 4 win to put LA up 3-1. Phoenix would force a Game 6, but LA would win handily, even though McAdoo struggled with just 6 points on 3 of 8 shooting. The NBA Finals brought the matchup everyone wanted. Boston versus LA, Bird versus Magic. This would be an incredible 7-game series, with the teams trading wins in the first 4 games before Boston went up 3-2. Up to this point, McAdoo was playing incredible. He had a rough Game 1, but since then had scored in double figures in every game while shooting at least 50%. And he was coming off of 18 points on over 58% shooting in Game 5. But then in the second half of Game 6, McAdoo injured his Achilles, which would keep him out of the remainder of the series. And even though LA forced a Game 7, they would feel the loss of McAdoo in that game, as they lost the series and the title. And for the regular season, McAdoo put up about 13 points, 4 rebounds, and half a block per game. McAdoo's minutes had decreased slightly in 85, and even though he was scoring less, he was doing it very efficiently on 52% shooting, as he would still appear in 66 games off the bench as one of the top reserves in the league, still putting up double figures in 34 games and 3 games with at least 20. The Lakers continued their dominance of the 80s, finishing with a 62-20 record and getting a first-round matchup versus Phoenix. This would be a 3-game series sweep, with McAdoo averaging over 18 points on nearly 69% shooting off the bench. Round 2 brought the Blazers. McAdoo would start slow with a combined 9 points in the first 2 games, which were both Lakers wins, but he would score at least 20 in the final 3 games, even recording a Game 4 double-double, as the Lakers moved on to the conference finals. They would play the Nuggets for a trip to the finals, and McAdoo would struggle quite a bit. He would have just 2 games in double figures, as overall for the series he averaged about 8 points on less than 44% shooting. But Denver was no match for LA, as the Lakers advanced to a finals rematch with Boston, and this time it would go much better. After dropping Game 1, the Lakers would come back to win 2 straight, which included a 19-point performance from McAdoo in their Game 3 win. He would have 10 points in a Game 4 loss, but then the Lakers would win the next 2 to win the series and the title. However, McAdoo had seen a drop in his playing time over the last 2 games, as he only received about 13 minutes per game, took a total of 10 shots, and scored 2 points across Games 5 and 6. Nonetheless, the Lakers won their second title during McAdoo's time there, and for the regular season, McAdoo put up about 10.5 points, 4.5 rebounds, and a block per game. With how well the Lakers' acquisitions over the last few years were developing, they elected not to pick up the contract option of a soon-to-be 34-year-old McAdoo going into 1986. McAdoo sat without a team for the first few months of the year, but would officially sign with Philly in early February. He would again assume a bench role, appearing in 29 games for an aging Sixers team, yet still averaging over 10 points per game. The Sixers would finish 54-28 and play Washington in the first round. McAdoo would miss the entire first round with a hyperextended knee, but would return in Game 3 of a second-round series with Milwaukee. He would again show his scoring ability, as after no points in Game 3, he would average over 15 points across the next 3 games. But in Game 7, he would have just 7 points on 1 of 5 shooting in a 1-point Sixers loss. And for the regular season, McAdoo would put up about 10 points, 3.5 rebounds, and half a block per game. Unhappy with the Sixers' contract offer going into '87, McAdoo would elect to go overseas, where he would spend the next 6 years playing for a few Italian teams, winning multiple championships, and having enough of an impact to be named one of EuroLeague's 50 greatest contributors in 2008, as he would ultimately retire from professional basketball in 1992 at the age of 41. Bob McAdoo has one of the least talked about Hall of Fame careers of all time. He truly was someone who changed the game as a type of player that had never been seen before. The way he played the game at his size was completely against the grain, but no one could figure him out, as he had one of the greatest 4-year stretches of all time to start his career. It's not that he's completely forgotten, it's just that a player who won 3 straight scoring titles and an MVP doesn't get nearly the amount of recognition he deserves. His career had 3 parts as a superstar in Buffalo and to a degree in New York, then a dark period in the middle into a career resurgence as a top 6 man for the Showtime Lakers. And it was no secret that he didn't want to come off the bench in LA, but at that point, all he cared about was a championship. So he put his ego to the side in the name of the team, and it resulted in some of the best years of his career. Bob McAdoo truly is the forgotten MVP, and even up to the day he retired, no one had figured out how to stop him. But that's it for today's episode on Bob McAdoo. Hope you enjoyed it, and make sure to subscribe for more videos like this one. If you liked it, check out this one on his brief teammate in Buffalo, or this one on another great player from the 70s. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.